Hello and welcome to Microsoft Hates Greg. My name is Greg Deckler, and today we're going to be getting back to some of sort of the roots of this channel, which are quick measures. Yay! So I've been now that the definitive guide to Power Query M is done, and I'm still working on Power BI Cookbook uh, third edition. So that's kind of up next, but it's kind of removed a lot of the stuff on my plate that I've had that's kept me from doing other stuff. Which one has been participating in the forums and then getting ideas for quick measures that way, which is where most of the quick measures come from. So anyway, so this one came from the forums, and it basically the problem here is given a list of, like, you have a bunch of dates and the customers, they've got a different appointments. They want to know whether, the date of their from the time of their first appointment, they have a score until their last appointment. So where's this customer, their last appointment here? Did they increase between that time? Did they decrease? Or was there no change? And then there's also the fun thing of, like, well, they've only had one appointment, so we don't want to count those in the no change department, that sort of stuff. So anyway, so that's the crux of this problem. So let's get into a little bit. We'll go into, this is the out in the quick measure gallery. It's published out there, along with another one I just published, which I don't know why I'd never published that one before. It was for, and I'll do a video on it. It's for adding working days to. So they came out with a network days function that I kind of, was a better way of calculating the working days between two dates. But there's no, like, add working days. So I created one a long time ago for, I think it was for an enterprise DNA video, and I never published it out there, but it's out there now. And I'll do a video on that one. And then I got some cool videos coming up, man. Just something I've been working on, just a bunch of stuff I've been working on. So anyway, exciting. All right, so let's get into this. Which, as we bring this up here, boy, you thought the March update was bad. Oh, yeah, April was as bad, if not worse. Power BI desktop, and, well, I mean, I don't even know what the point of the March update was. It lasted for all of, like, what, like 13 days, and it was dead. It's April version came out. Anyway, so all right, so let's take a look at this total increased measure. We'll look at the DAX here, and I'm going to make this bigger. Okay, so classic no calculate. All right. So I've got two add columns, and then I'm doing a distinct on my customer ID. So that's grabbing my customer ID, distinct list of values. Now, I've got some videos on this. I use distinct. I don't use values. Values has problematic where it can bring back, like, a blank empty row. And in all of my testing, distinct has always been faster than values. I might do a video on that to try to prove that out. It's really anecdotal every time I take a formula and I change the values to distinct, it always runs faster for some reason. But anyway, we won't get into that. Use distinct, don't use values. So what we're doing is, the first column that we're adding is we need to find out what the score was on the first date, right? So I have a distinct list of customers. So for each customer, right now, the customer ID is in context, right? So I create this this first first date score, right? I'm going to add that column to my list of distinct customers. So the first thing I do is I do a var. I grab my customer ID. Now, I could use earlier here, but people will complain about that. But whatever. So I just do it with vars now. Fine. So the first thing, and what you have here is you have a double lookup, right? Because the first lookup, you're trying to find the minimum date. So what we do is we do a min-x. We filter our table where our customer ID equals our customer ID that we grabbed in that variable, and we grab the minimum date, right? So now the next piece is that we use that date that we just looked up to find the score on that date for that customer. And so that's what first score does, right? Our first score, min-x, I could use max-x there, it doesn't matter because we're going to be filtering down to a single date, a single row. So I filter the all selected in the table where the customer ID equals the customer ID and the date equals the first date, and I grab the score, right? And then I return that first score. As it just so happens, last date score is exactly the same, right? I grab the customer ID. This time I grab the maximum date in context. And then I grab the score, right? And I return that last score. And then I do another add columns, right, where I take the diff, I create a column called diff, and it's just the last date score minus the first date score. So now what I can do is then say I can do a var result where count rows, where I filter that virtual table essentially where the diff is greater than 0. And voila, I have a count of the number of customers that have increased in score from the date of their first appointment to the date of their last appointment. So we get a total of 4 here. And if you go through these dates, you will, this information, you'll see that there are 4 people that increased their score. Now, the next thing that was requested in here was to get the percentage increase. Now, this one is very simple. So total percent increased measure, as you might suspect, it's really simple. We just take our total increased measure, which in this case is 4. We just do a count rows across all of our distinct customer IDs, and we do a divide on that, right? And we get a percentage. Poof. Right? Now, the next one was rather interesting. They wanted to know the average number of appointments for the people that had increased, right? What is their average number of appointments between their first and last, appointments where they increased in score? So that one is a little more interesting. Unfortunately, because it's very much the same as before, but because we can't return tables in measures, which is frustrating, we have to basically, repeat a bunch of code. So the first part of this code is exactly the same. The calculation of underscore table, that variable is exactly the same as before, right? So now we need to get our increased customers, right? So we do a distinct where we select columns, we filter our virtual table where the diff is greater than 0, right? And we grab the ID, the customer ID out of that. So now once we have a list of those distinct customers, right, we can then do we do an average X, we do a summarize, we filter our table where the customer ID is in those increased customers. We summarize by customer ID, we do a count where we just do a count rows of the table, right? And then we just average X that count. And then that returns back a value of 4.25, which if you will notice, actually, I believe if you go through the data, there are 3 customers that had 4 appointments that increased and 1 that had 5. And so that's where we get our 4.25 number from. All right, so total decrease, total percent, these are exactly identical. So total decreased measure, right? It's really simple. All we have to do is it's the same exact logic. We just have to it's the last row of our result, right? Where we do a diff, where we filter where our diff is less than 0 versus greater than 0. And then we can do all of these decreased measures. Now the average appointments no change measure is exactly identical. Where is it? No change measure. Very much identical. We just have to take where the diff is equal to 0. Right? Pretty simple. Now the tricky part comes in when we don't want to count. We don't want to count customers that have only had 1 appointment. So that's where it gets a little bit more tricky. And so this one takes care of that. So all we have to do is, you can see where instead of what's changed in here is instead of distinct customer ID, what I've done is I've replaced that where I'm filtering a summarize of the table by customer ID. I get the count, I count the rows in the table, and I filter out any row that has less than, that is 1 or fewer, well, fewer than 2 rows. Let's put it that way. The row count has to be greater than 1, right? And so just by doing that right there, that filters out any customers that have only had 1 appointment, 1 row in the table. And so the rest of the calculation essentially remains exactly the same, right? And so that's why these right here are with the first measure, which does not filter out appointments, where basically we had 2 customers that had 1 appointment each. And then that's why these are blank down here, is because we filter those customers out in this no appointments change measure 2. So now this is out in the quick measure gallery, right? If I could actually bring it up. Yep, it's out there in the quick measure gallery. You can download the PBX. It's attached where these things are located. They're a little hard to find sometimes, but they're attached way down here. So you can actually download that, file and experiment with this yourself. It's really all I had for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you next time.